Hi everyone, I'm Lizie Allen from Thin Wool and Thread Quilting, and I'm in Australia and I'm a Grace Ambassador, and I'm really excited to join everyone for Fall Festival 2023. And the focus this year is on fashion, which I was really excited about, and we were asked to make a project for festival in fashion and quilting, and I thought, gee, I love this. I love making the quilted jackets, and I thought, okay, I'd like to share with you how easy it is for us as home-based quilters to make our own quilted jackets. So this one that I'm wearing was made with a little Japanese inspired cotton with just a fabulous navy lining. They're easy to do, and it's got a collar, and there's so many different styles of these jackets that we can make. I thought, well, we can be all our own little quilted jacket fashionistas. So I'll show you a couple that I have made. So this one is a little bit more relaxed. The fabric is very bright and very loud. It's by an Australian designer. And this one I actually just quilted in up and down curvy lines, and it's got a really bright aqua inside. Honestly, they're soft, they're easy, they're washable. You just throw them in the washing machine. I like to use a low loft cotton batting. Gives you the warmth. Don't over quilt them, girls, because you don't want the jacket to be soft. You literally want it to be that cozy jacket. This is another one I made. This one I actually made for my mum, and she wanted more sort of sedate vintage style fabric, and I did a nice flared sleeve on it, and the jacket itself is a little bit flared, and of course it has a collar. Now I have this jacket pattern. It's called the Cozy Quilted Jacket. There's 3 styles in this jacket pattern, and it's available as a digital download on my website. But I thought today, because this is exciting and we're going to try something new, I've done a new jacket pattern, and this one I called the Weekender. So it's not quite so fitted or stiff in design. So what it is it's a more relaxed fit, so that winter's coming, when the weekend comes, you can put that cozy winter jumper on, and you can put your very fashionable quilted jacket that you made at home. Now the wonderful thing about making the jackets is whether you have a long arm machine, whether you have a Q zone with a mid arm, or you have a cutie with a domestic on it, you can do this. It's a really, really easy project. Essentially, what we need to do is we need to make a sandwich. So we have the top, the batting and the backing, and we cut out our pattern pieces, and each of our pattern pieces tells us which size we need to make the sandwich. So for a long arm, I would cheat and I would just literally frame up the entire yardage that I need. But if I have a smaller frame or a Q zone, I could just make up a piece and a sandwich, and I could then quilt that for each individual piece that I need to cut out. And this is where you can have so much fun with the quilting. I stippled this because I did want it to be light and relaxed, and I felt that the fabric was quite bold. So good old-fashioned stipple was perfect, but honestly, you can have fun. You can do cross-hatching, line designs. You can use a heavier weight thread and do a longer stitch and make it more look like a shishiko, or that you've actually hand stitched it. So I thought this was a great project because it doesn't matter which quilting machine you have. You don't need a fancy sewing machine either, because when we construct the garment, we'll only be using a straight stitcher. And to finish our edges on the garment and around our necklines and everything, all we're going to do is use bias or binding. So we've all bound a quilt. And the other thing I thought is, you might have an old quilt that you want to repurpose. you can make a jacket out of it. Or you bought a quilt and off eBay and you thought, oh, I want to do something with it, refashion it into a jacket. Or maybe you want to make a vest, no sleeves. The other thing that you can do is you can patchwork blocks that you never ever found they're a use for. They're in the UFO box. Finish them, make a jacket. So what you'll see here is I've actually, on my pattern piece, it had place on fold. So this would be my back piece. So this is my quilt sandwich, which I did to size, and I've actually now folded and pinned my pattern piece. So that's the back, this is the front, and you can see this was a leftover. So I'd actually previously made a toddler jacket out of this. So I thought, no, I'm going to try this new jacket, and this was pre-quilted, so I thought, here we go. And then this is my sleeve. And of course I'm going to have to cut 2 of those according to the pattern. So I'm going to cut these out, and then I'm going to show you how easy it is to do the rest of the steps to make the jacket. I did pick a contrasting fabric to create all my bias or binding with, because I just thought, no, let's be a little bit different. So I hope you enjoy this journey as much as I do, and that it inspires you to get that unfinished quilt or buy that bold fabric and make your own quilted jacket. Here I have my pattern piece, and I do like to just pop it down on my mat, and I use the comfort cutter, and I just pop the ruler over, and I like to use the cutter to basically cut it out, because these are our self-healing mats and it's just so fast. So that's an easy way to cut out your pattern pieces. And when I go to do the top here of the sleeve cap, I just do it by hand and just slowly go around with the cutter. Okay, so I have my pattern pieces on my cutting mat, and I will tell you, I don't mind cutting out the pieces by simply placing them on my cutting mat, popping my ruler down, and then using my comfort cutter and going through it, because it's a self-healing mat. It doesn't matter that we've got the batting there, and it's really quite fast and efficient. When I do this part of the curve, just do it nice and slowly, and honestly, you'll have your pattern pieces cut out in no time. The next thing I want to do is use a marking tool, and what I want to do is I want to mark all the notches and the references that are on the pattern pieces. So I just use the blue water soluble pen. If you've got tailor's chalk, so I'm just going to quickly go and mark those in. It will just make the sewing so much easier. Just got a couple on the back piece, and then I have, what do I have? I have some notches that I need to line up, so I'll put those ones on, and put them on the actual sleeve, because what it is so that this sleeve cap fits this armhole, I will line up the notches, and then that makes the construction of it really, really easy. So you can see that only took a couple of seconds to actually do. Now, what I'm going to do is when we start, I'm going to just take these pins out. Alright, and we start with the shoulder. So I'll just pop my pattern piece to the side, and I've decided that this is going to be the right side of my jacket. So it will be right side spacing, and now I need my 2 fronts. So we'll get those organised. Alright. And I'll just put this pattern piece over there. So what I'm going to do is I need it right side to right side facing. So that one would be my left and this one would be my right. And then what I'm going to do is just line those up and I'm going to pin them. And this is where we just use our sewing machine and we're going to stitch the cross, the top of those shoulders. Now, the pattern says to use a 1.5 centimetre seam allowance, which is, I think, basically half an inch. I'll let you know on that one. I'm so used to going from metric to imperial. All right, so let's get started and we will stitch these shoulder seams. Okay, so I've taken the time to stitch the 1.5 centimetre seam allowance or half inch for you girls who are imperial, and basically use a stitch length about 2.5. Take the time to backstitch, start and finish, just because the last thing you want is your garment to come apart. Now, what we need to do is I'm going to take this over. I've just got my little mini pressing wool mat and I'm going to iron those seams flat and open just by pressing them. And then what we're going to do is we'll trim the excess off. Just press that nice and firm and then I'll do the other shoulder. Now what I'm going to do is I'll just trim that excess away because this is where we pop our first bias over that seam. And essentially what we're doing is covering all the raw edges of our garment. Now for the pattern, it says that we need, I think I calculated about 3 yards of bias. So I'm going to start out and I'm going to make myself some bias strips. So basically I'm just going to, from selvage to selvage, fold my fabric from in half and then once again across. And then I'll just place that down on my mat and I'm just going to cut myself 3, because I want a half-inch bias, I'm going to cut myself 1 inch, so we literally double it. I'm just going to line up my ruler here and not cut my jacket, and I'll just cut myself 3 strips. The next position. And I'll show you how we make the bias. It's really, really very easy. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is going to make the bias that we're going to sew across this seam to seal the raw edges. So basically, I had trouble doing this, and then somebody taught me this trick where if I cut the fabric on a 45 degree, like so, it's really quite easy when you actually feed it in here to the bias maker. This is a tailor's oar. You don't need one. It's a nice sharp implement. You can actually use a pin, but this one came in my little kit. All you do is pop it in that slit, and all of a sudden the fabric comes out quite easily. And you can see, when I get this going correctly, that what we're going to do is I'll just feed that back. we're going to make a lovely flat bias edge. So here we go. We just place that down here and I make the bias. And essentially what we're doing with the bias is we're making this so that it covers our shoulder seams. And it means that, you know, we don't need a serger, we don't need well, an overlocker as we call them here in Australia. We don't need anything fancy, and it just turns both sides of the fabric in for us. And if your fabric keeps moving on you, you can just take a pin and push it into your felt mat. And it's okay, guys, I've got a nice heavy board underneath. I'm not for anything going to melt my True Cut cutting mat. Alright, so we just do that. We just make a nice bias. And you'll need about 3 yards, I think I worked out, to be able to do the garment. And when we sew it down, it creates a really nice top stitch on the other side of our jacket. And because it's already quite heavily quilted, it's just adding another element into our jacket. Okay, so I've just laid the jacket pieces down, and what I'm going to do is just cut a little bit that will cover each seam adequately. And then essentially what we're doing is I'm just going to pin that in position across my seam. And then we'll take it over to the sewing machine and we will stitch that down. Okay, so you can see that when you sew the bias tape down nice and flat, it really does finish the garment really nicely. So now I'm just going to trim those excess and any threads that I would like not to be there. Okay, so we've trimmed those up. Now remember I said to you when we had our pattern pieces to mark the notches, the next step is we need to pop the sleeve in. So once again, I'm going to turn it so that it's right sides facing. Okay, and then what I will do is I'll take a sleeve and it once again will be right sides facing, and I will find that lovely little center point and I'm going to pin that to the center point here of our seam. Alright, and then it's really as simple as finding the blue mark, which was our notch on our pattern, and matching it to the blue mark that's on this. So we just line that up and we pop our pins in position, and it really does go quite quickly. And sometimes I think less is more, so the more pins that I actually place in the garment, probably the easier it will be to get it in first time and be quite happy with it. So just adjust that. And then once again, I will sew this with a 1.5 centimetre, or as you girls would say, a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And then what we'll do is we'll do exactly the same thing. The only difference is I will actually open the bias and I will stitch it in the crease of the bias here. Then I will roll that over and over and then top stitch. Alright, so this is what we called a rolled bias edge, and the other one on the shoulder was a flat bias edge. So we'll get that going and we'll come back in a jiffy. Okay, so you can actually see I've stitched the seam and I made sure I back stitched, so both sleeves are now in. Then I use the scissors and I cut the seam back to a 1/4 inch. It's a scant 1/4 inch. And then what it is I took the bias tape and I just opened it, and you sew in that crease line, because what we're going to do now is we're going to take that bias tape and we're just going to fold it over, and now we're going to top stitch there, and now we have a beautifully encased seam with the bias tape. Okay, so you can actually see both sleeves are in, and it's great. If you ever open the jacket, you know you've got this lovely bias accent on the inside. So the next step is, this is where it really starts to take shape, is I'm going to line it up and I'm going to push one seam to the left and one seam to the right, in other words nest them, and I'm going to literally do exactly what I did on the sleeves. I will stitch that 1.5 inch seam allowance, and then I'll stitch down the bias tape by opening it up and folding it over. And because on this one, on the sides of this jacket, I made the jacket back a little bit longer than the front. Remember we talked about those markings? I'm going to line up those markings there, and I'm going to stop so that we have that nice little opening on the sides of our jacket, because they do say the devil is in the detail. Okay, so I sewed the side seams, and then I've done the same thing. I've encased the seam with the bias. With this edge here, what I did is I opened the bias tape and I folded it back 1/4 inch, so that as I started stitching that down, I didn't have a raw edge exposed here. So our next step is so this is 1.5 inch that I cut from the fabric, and now what it is I just folded that in half. I didn't actually make a bias, because what we're going to do is, from the wrong side, I'm going to stitch this down now with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and then bring that over. The reason I've left that double is I like the bulk. I like the bulk that it will give this actual outer edge of the garment. So I'll get on with that and we'll see how that turns out. Okay, so I've actually gone and stitched the bias on and then turned it over, and you can see it actually comes up really quite nicely, and it's got a little bit more body than the side seams, which is nice around the neckline. So here on the side where I turned the bias under, I'll now just flatten that out, and I'll just top stitch there so that it closes that casing really, really nicely. And really the only thing left to do now is we'll do exactly the same thing on the bottom of our sleeve cuff, where I will stitch this to the wrong side. I can pick it up, stitch that to the wrong side, then roll it over and top stitch, and then basically we're at that stage where we decide whether we want buttons or pockets. Okay, so I finally finished it. I've put the bias tape on the sleeves and it's all done. So we're really at the stage where I decide whether with the scraps I want to put a pocket on, or whether I want to put some buttonholes. But I'd like to say thank you for watching. I hope you have as much fun watching Fall Festival as I will. If this has inspired you to maybe take an old quilt or a bedspread or something, or just quilt a piece of fabric and make your own jackets, I put all the patterns into one on my website, and you can just digitally download them. I did have a pattern, oh here we go, right where I left it. Alright, that's a paper pattern that the girls can buy, but if you just want instant gratification, you can go to thimblethreadquilting.com.au and just simply do a digital download, and you can make your own cozy winter jacket. So, and remember girls, wash these. The moment you wash them, They soften up and relax, and they're literally a cozy jacket. So thanks for watching.